Be aware of what's arising when you take the precepts and when you take the refuges. Keep your mindfulness with you. It's a very beautiful thing to make this commitment to try our best. Doesn't mean we're going to be perfect, but we try our best to make a determination to not harm ourselves and other people through our speech and action. And I think sometimes when we do this, taking refuges and precepts is almost synonymous with being a Buddhist, whatever that means to some people. But, it's even written in the suttas, what is an upasaka or upasika, which are disciples of the Buddha, lay disciples of the Buddha. And it will say, taking the refuges, the tisarana in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And then it says, what is a virtuous upasika, upasaka? And that's someone who takes the refuges and the precepts. And we talk a lot about the precepts, and I think that's really important. But today I wanted to focus on the refuges and talk about refuge. Because sometimes I think when we do this, the refuge part gets missed, or maybe not understood, or not appreciated. And we did it 3 times. Like, we really wanted to confirm it, didn't we? I take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And what did that feel like? Did it feel like something beautiful and heartwarming? Did it feel like something confusing? Or was it something that you didn't participate in actively because you weren't really even sure what it was? What is this taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha? We're here to just investigate this and just to share, because refuge is a very personal thing. I looked it up in the dictionary, and it said refuge is a shelter or protection from danger or distress. And it also said refuge is something of which one has as a source of help or strength. Shelter, protection, help, and a source of strength. And safety. I think safety goes in with shelter or protection. So here we're taking Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha as a source of refuge, or our source of refuge. Is this something that we think about? Is this something that comes to our mind? What do we take refuge in? What is our source of shelter or protection? Or what offers us strength or helps us in our time of need? When I was a little kid, for me, my refuge was my parents. That was where I thought my safety and security was. It's not like that for everyone. Not everyone has that. Some people don't have a parent, or some people lose their parents when they're a kid. And it's like a reality check that the world and our parents, that refuge has a sense of instability to it. And last week we had a nice group here, and there was some younger Dhamma practitioners in their 20s. And the one girl was saying, now that she's got her degree and she has a job, a lot of her colleagues are encouraging her to focus her attention on her career and making a lot of money. And it almost feels like for some people that becomes a refuge, the refuge of the safety and security of a job, or the safety and security of having money, having an income, having gain, having a house, maybe having a family. You can look within yourself and see where refuge is for you. So refuge is shelter, and protection. But what do we find? And certainly I think we notice this more and more the older we get, is these things of the world that I think many of us maybe took as our refuge when we were younger. We start to see the instability of them. Like where there's gain, there's loss, isn't there? You know, where there's a good job, when you're hired, you can get fired or let go, or jobs just end, or people get sick, or we get sick. The Buddha warns us not to get lost in the refuge of youth and of health, because these are so unstable. And we see that, don't we? We look around, we see that. The encouragement is what we chanted today, is we're taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as our shelter and protection. Well, so what does that mean? What does taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha mean? So I wasn't born a Buddhist. I was born into a Christian family and was brought up with Christian traditions and Christian conventions. So when I first learned about Buddhism and I learned about the refuges, you know, it was understanding it from a very heady point of view. And I thought Buddha was this historical figure 2,500 years ago, and the Dhamma was the teaching that he taught, and the Sangha I thought of as the monastics, the monks and nuns who awakened to the Dhamma and who carried this tradition along from the time of the Buddha until now. But then the Buddha wasn't a god, he was a human being. So what are we taking refuge in with the Buddha? And how can I turn that from being something in my head to something that develops in my heart and helps me awaken on this path? So actually, one of the things that was really helpful for me when I reflected on taking refuge in Buddha initially was the thought that the Buddha was just a human. And he awakened to freedom from suffering. He awakened to something beyond the suffering of this world. And he could do it. And he said that the doors to the deathless are open. We just need to turn our attention to this, dedicate our attention to this. And this is available to all of us. And actually, this was really, really inspiring for me to think of it like that and to take refuge in a human being that was able to do this and was able to do this without a teacher. You know, he was, from all accounts, this amazing human being who was able to awaken to the Dhamma and to be free from all suffering, to live with a heart at peace no matter what was happening in the world. And so I really liked that. And so I would take refuge in Buddha and take refuge that the teachings that he taught were the teachings that he used to awaken to this freedom from suffering. And this is what was carried on with the Dhamma. I was asking a couple people before this talk about refuge, who've been Buddhists for quite a while. They didn't grow up as Buddhists. And one of the things that seemed to be a consistent message was that they found initially refuge in the Buddha harder than refuge in Dhamma and Sangha, because Dhamma and Sangha was much more tangible to them here and now. But Buddha was something that we had to be brought up sort of in one's imagination as a historical figure. I was looking through the suttas today, and I noticed when the Buddha was nearing his time for parinibbana, when the energy was leaving the body, Shortly before that time, he was very sick, but he decided that it wasn't time to go yet. He was able to heal himself, and his long-term attendant, Ananda, was incredibly grateful that he was able to recover from his very serious illness, and he was rejoicing. And the Buddha said to him, Ananda, don't take anyone other than yourself as a refuge. You need to be a refuge unto yourself. You need to be an island unto yourself. Let the Dhamma be your refuge. Let nothing else be your refuge. And Ananda said, well, how am I to let the Dhamma be my refuge? And he said, through mindfulness and wisdom, through developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and using the mindfulness of the body, of feelings, of the mind, and of understanding Dhamma and investigating Dhamma and developing wisdom with that. Let that be how the Dhamma and how you are your own refuge, and the Dhamma is your refuge. How does it work then? So we're taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Are Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha all the same thing? You know, these Forest Sangha calendars that come out every year, I very clearly remembered this calendar. It was Ajahn Chah quotes, and it was one on refuge. Ajahn Chah said, humbly allow the noble triple gem, that's the Tisarana, of wisdom, truth, and purity to abide in your heart. Humbly allow the noble triple gem of wisdom, truth, and purity to abide in your heart. So Buddha as wisdom, do you know the word Buddha means knowing? So a Samma Sambuddha, which was how they described this Buddha that we talk about, our historical Buddha, is a Samma Sambuddha, is an all-knowing. He's all-knowing. Do you know, he actually never referred to himself as Buddha. It was like an adjective to describe him, but he used to refer to himself as Tathagata. Do you know this word Tathagata? You could think of it like Tata and Gata. Tata is sometimes translated as suchness, but I kind of like the translation of the way it is. The way it is. Suchness. And Gata, some people feel it's from Gata, like from the verb meaning to go. You could say gone, one who's gone. Or you could say one who abides in the way it is, or one who awakens to the way it is. Tathagata. Just like the Buddha. So Buddha is like knowing. So when you know the Dhamma, when you're awakened to the Dhamma, you know Buddha, because you know the way things are, the way things truly are. The truth of the way things are. There's many ways to describe it. So really, Buddha is something we can all awaken to. And Dhamma, what is Dhamma? I used to think Dhamma is the teachings, the Buddha's teachings. But the Buddha always said the teachings, don't look at the teachings, look at what the teachings are pointing to. The teachings are just the directional signs. You know, even if there wasn't a Buddha, there would still be Dhamma. Even if there wasn't anything written down in any Tipitaka books, there'd still be Dhamma. Because the Dhamma is the way it is. It's the true nature of reality. And this is what we're awakening to. And I loved the third one, the Sangha. I love how Ajahn Chah used purity for the word Sangha. And I like to think of Sangha. Sangha is those who are devoting themselves to the purity of this path. It doesn't matter what you're wearing or whether you shave your head, but you're devoting yourself to the purity of this path and awakening to it. That's what the Sangha is. So we are taking refuge in the awakening that comes with this purity of this path. We're purifying ourselves of greed, hatred, and delusion. So when we take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, wisdom, truth, and purity, that's a very beautiful way of thinking of it. And it's within all of us. If we devote ourselves in that direction, because like the Buddha says, we need to be a refuge unto ourselves. And we need the Dhamma to be our refuge, that we can devote ourselves through our practice, through our meditation, just like we did. What were we doing for the first 45 minutes? We were learning to understand what's going on in the mind, to see the true nature of the body and the mind and phenomena of arising and ceasing, and growing in wisdom moment by moment with this. And this is what we're taking refuge in. There's another little quote. One gone for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha sees the Four Noble Truths with clear understanding. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're devoting ourselves to. And then refuge becomes, it's not in your head anymore. It's an experience, isn't it? We experience refuge in our heart. It's like the culmination, and true refuge is like the culmination of faith, wisdom, mindfulness, samadhi, and energy all together. This is true refuge. And it can start, for some people, it can start with a lot of faith. They hear these teachings and they might not really understand it, but they have so much faith in it. And there's a power to that, because that faith inspires us to lead our life in a wholesome direction, to keep precepts, to be good people, to be kind people, to be generous people, to devote ourselves to understanding our mind and meditating. Or we come through, maybe we don't have that much faith, but we have enough faith to investigate. And we use that investigation to grow in wisdom. And it's interesting because as you grow in wisdom, I think the faith grows along with it. They work together so beautifully. Because what are we putting our faith in? We're putting our faith in how we're understanding experiences, and how we're able to see ourselves grow and grow in letting go of suffering when it arises. Have you noticed that, as I think a lot of you here are very dedicated practitioners, and have you noticed as you practice Dhamma, you take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, in wisdom, truth, and purity within yourself, that your suffering, the suffering that you used to experience, you're able to let go of it more and more. Maybe not 100%, maybe not all the time. Maybe there's wobbles that come, but pay attention and see, that used to really upset me, but now I don't get so upset about it. Moment by moment, see, can we let go of things? Can we let go of the conventions of the world or the views and opinions that aren't a safe refuge, that aren't a true refuge? The Buddha warns us about unsafe refuges or untrue refuges that people have a tendency to go to. Can we be aware of them and turn away from the worldly habits and conventions and views, or worldly sights and sounds? Some people want to run away to the forest. They think that's what they should do, run away to the forest, and their suffering won't come with them. Like there's some magic in the forest. But is the suffering in the forest or in the city, or is the suffering in the mind? Whether you're in the forest or in the city. So the Buddha said, don't take refuge in forest glades or mountaintops or parkland shrines, but to take refuge within the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, within our heart, that we're developing with sincerity, with purity, with wisdom, with truth. I'm going to say, there was this one more. Somebody sent this to me. This was Ajahn Sucitto. He said, a true refuge is that which remains when your world goes upside down. This is why people of great faith can survive disasters and tyrannies. It's easy to think of it as a place. A true refuge is that which remains when your world goes upside down. So what remains when our world goes upside down? Because sometimes it will really feel like, even right now, with how the world is, it can feel like there's no safety, there's no protection, there's no shelter in the world. There's wars. There's always wars happening in the world. Maybe there's changes in governments. Maybe it's our body. Maybe it's something like a cancer or something like that. Or maybe it's a family crisis that's happening. So when we take Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha as our refuge, we have to see something which is not in this world. So we're keeping our awareness at what isn't of the world. I mentioned that the world arises, thoughts and views and words arise from silence and cease in silence. Sights and sounds and smells and tastes and fears and strong emotions arise from silence and cease in silence. We're so busy sometimes paying attention to those things that are arising, and that's what we call the world, isn't it? What's the world? We make our own world. The world is what we're experiencing and interpreting through our five senses and our thinking mind, isn't it? So for every person, the world is something different, because we're all interpreting our experiences differently based on our conditioning. We're taught in school, we're taught right from when we're little kids to pay attention to the world, to these objects of the world, to the objects of the senses. But when we come to Buddhism, all of a sudden we're taught to look inward and see, where is all this arising from? What's the nature of the world? Is it stable? Is it unstable? Can we start to see its impermanent nature? Can we start to see its impersonal nature? Instability of it all. And then can we see there's a silence, there's a stillness, there's a peacefulness where it's all arising from? Can we even find that for one moment? Can you find for one moment when you look at the world and the world seems to be going crazy, and for some of us it's felt like that for a long time, for some longer than others, can we turn within and say, I don't need that. I don't need to buy into that, because there's a still awareness that's free from that, that's just observing the changing nature of that. Can I abide as that still awareness, even just for one moment? Because when I can do that for one moment, there's a moment of freedom. Can I take a breath? Can I just breathe? Can I not be so lost in my thinking that I can just be with an in-breath and an out-breath, and the emptiness and the silence between the breath? And can I find the freedom and the peace in that moment? It's interesting because we think we need to get something or go somewhere for refuge, but actually the refuge is right here within us. We just need to let go. We just need to let go of what's getting in the way of refuge. We have to trust, to look in and know that the peace is within all of us. The refuge, the freedom, the Buddha is within all of us, right here, right now. It's not something we have to get in the future, right here, right now, in each moment. We just need to open our heart to it. So take a breath. See if we can have any moment where we're not lost in thinking, where we're not lost in unpleasant experiences through the body, where we can abide in the awareness that just sees this as arising and ceasing. And when we can truly disentangle from the world, we can start to really feel the freedom of that awareness. And it's a process. You have to see this is a process of letting go, bit by bit. And the mind